Okay, so thank you all very much for coming along today to our UCAT session. Esther is here from UCAT, so she is the real expert on the system and the test itself, and she'll be talking to you for around about 25-30 minutes, all about the UCAT itself. She will be taking questions at the very end, so just a request from me. I know you'll have questions, and I'm sure they will be coming flying in any second now. But Esther has a really comprehensive 30-minute talk. So you will probably find a lot of questions are answered in the talk. So if you have got questions, kind of keep them on hand if you can until the end. If you do have questions as you go along, then obviously do put them in there and Esther will get to them at the very end. So thank you very much, Esther. I will hand over to you.
Great. All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen now just so you don't have to sit looking at me for the next part of the session. And the talk itself should take around, sorry, just 1 second. 1 second, sorry. Just going to get this up. 1 second, guys. Sorry for the delay. I'm usually a bit more on it than this. Screen share button is just covering where I want to do the presentation. So let me try again. Go. There we go. There we go. Hopefully you should be able to see that now. Okay, so the presentation itself should take about 25 to 30 minutes. Yeah, hopefully I will be able to cover everything you need to ask about the UCATs. So if you can save any questions towards the end, obviously, unless things like admissions questions for Leicester. But what I'm going to cover today is the test itself, what's in it. At this stage of the year, you've probably all had a look at the website already. Some of you may even be a good way through your revision and have booked your test. If you're not, don't worry, but if you are, hopefully I will try and answer any questions you've got. We'll look at things you might need to be aware of that you're not, things like bursaries and access arrangements. We'll look at the format of the test itself, different question types and scoring, and then how to best prepare for the test, which I guess is the bit you're most interested in. And then I'll talk a little bit about the test day itself, and hopefully answer any questions you may have or worries you may have about the actual day of the test. And we'll talk about results and what to do when you get your UCAT score as well. So hopefully this will answer most of your questions as we go through. So you know that this is a mandatory admissions test. There's two in the UK, so it's the UCAT or the BMAT, and which test you choose to sit really depends on which universities you want to apply to. They are at different times of the year, so it is possible to sit both tests and revise for them separately. Obviously, the UCAT runs through the summer, the BMAT is on one day towards the start of November, so it's possible to sit both tests. You sit the test this year at the end of year 12 before you make your UCAT application, which needs to be on the 15th of October. And it is a one-shot deal, the same with the BMAT. You can only sit the test once each year, so it's really important to be properly prepared. It's a 2-hour multiple choice computer-based test. It's different to the BMAT again in that there's no curriculum content. So we believe that those skills are assessed through your academic grades. What we're looking at assessing is mental abilities and skills that our universities believe are important for being successful in a clinical career, so essential to being a good future doctor or dentist. You sit the test at your nearest Pearson VUE test centre, so if any of you have got older brothers or sisters, or you know anybody who sat the test last year, you may be aware that we also offered it online last year for people to sit at home. And that was obviously because of the pandemic. A lot of the test centres were closed, schools were closed, and there was a lot more uncertainty. We're all a long way into this process now, aren't we? And things have sort of returned to a little bit more normal. So at the moment, we are anticipating a test centre delivery. We're not offering the option to sit it at home. All our test centres are currently open in the UK, social distancing measures in place, and we believe that that is the best way and the best experience for you to sit your test. both for us in terms of delivering the test. It's designed to be delivered in the test centre, also in terms of test security, and also in terms of the candidate experience. So what is the best way for you to sit it? When we sat it last year, we had quite a few issues with people having lagging or losing internet connection, depending on how stable their internet speed was at home. So a lot of people got kicked out halfway through the test and had to sit it again. So sitting at a test centre guarantees you a good test experience. That's why we believe that's the best way to sit it. Okay. You don't need to make notes. All this is on the UCAT website, just to sort of say. So here's a list of the universities that require the UCAT. There's 31 at the moment. So if you're intending to apply to any of these universities, then you need to sit the UCAT this year. As I've said, if you were looking to apply to Leicester and some other ones and Imperial, then you may need to sit both tests, but that's up to you. It's driven by who you want to apply to. And these are the dates. So already testing has begun. So we opened registration back at the start of June. And booking opened end of June, and testing has now started. So that's not to say we're on the back foot at all. If you haven't booked your test yet, please don't worry. You've still got plenty of time. The UCAT is open for 2 months, so you can choose to sit your test anywhere between the 26th of July and the 29th of September. By the 22nd of September, really, we expect everybody to have booked a test. So that's a week before testing ends. Up until that time, you can book your test yourself through your web accounts, through your UCAT account that you'll create. After that, you have to call customer services. We actually close web booking, and that's because it's the last week of testing. Things are really busy. You're probably going to have to travel a long way to get a convenient test centre, because we do get incredibly busy in that last week or two. So by the 22nd of September, we would expect everybody to have booked and hopefully have sat their test. You can test right up until the 29th of September, but if you were to ask my advice on when is the best time to sit your UCAT, then I would kind of say August or towards the end of August, early September, before you go back into year 13. Again, it's pretty obvious once you get into year 13, you're going to have your school or college work back on the go, and you're going to have a lot of pressure to be finishing and submitting your UCAS application. So you're going to have a lot of other pressures on you. So I would sort of say August or early September before you go back to school is probably the ideal time to sit the test. The good thing about the UCAT, which is different to the BMAT, is that you get your scores before you submit your UCAS application. So you can use your score to inform how you submit your UCAS application, or where you submit, where you apply to. And I'll talk to that in a little while. So things you might not be aware of, and again, if you're not and you've already booked your test, don't worry, it's not too late. So the test costs £75 for UK candidates, but we do also offer bursaries to cover the full test fee. So if you are classed as in financial need, or you meet certain financial criteria, and it's quite broad criteria, it's on the screen there, and it's also all on the bursary scheme page of our website. You can submit a really simple online application for a bursary, and we send you a voucher that you can use to pay for your test. If you didn't know about this and you think, oh, I think I might be eligible, and you've already paid for your test, don't worry. Apply for the voucher anyway. If you're approved, we'll send you the code, and then you can just claim a refund back through customer services. So it's really easy to do. Another thing you might not be aware of is access arrangements. So if you currently get extra time or rest breaks or any other type of accommodation in your school or college exams, then we should be able to mirror most access arrangements within the UCAT. We can't do everything, so we can't have readers or scribes, and we can't do stop the clock, unlimited rest breaks, but most other things we can provide. So if you think you're eligible, have a look at the access arrangements page of the website. Again, it's a really simple online application. You just upload your evidence that shows what you get in your school exams, and we should be able to make those arrangements for you. Okay, so let's look at the test format of the UCAT itself. There's 5 separately timed subtests. So I mentioned separately timed because if you're quicker on one subtest, you don't get more time in the next one. They're each individually timed. There's 4 cognitive subtests, and then a 5th subtest of situational judgment, or SJT, as it's more commonly known. So if I keep mentioning SJT, it's a situational judgment test I'm talking about. So let's have a look at these in turn. So the first is verbal reasoning. This is the lowest scoring out of the 4 cognitive subtests, just so you know. So if you are finding this a bit trickier or you're scoring a bit lower on this, then that is common. That's the most lowest score out of the 4 subtests. It's quite time pressured, as is most of the UCAT. So you've got 21 minutes to answer 44 questions. Verbal reasoning is looking at your ability to sort of absorb a large amount of information, critically read things, so looking at what is important, what's irrelevant or distracting, and trying to find your ability to pull out the conclusions you need to quite quickly. You'll be presented with 11 passages of text, and each passage will have 4 questions associated with it. So we have a look at a verbal reasoning question. I'm not going to work through these questions in this session just because this is not what it's about. You know, it's not a revision session, but I think it's important, if you've not looked at the live test yet, that you kind of get a feel for what it looks like. If you've been doing the question banks and the practice tests, then you'll already be familiar with this. So this is taken from the question banks. In the live test, you would also see a timer button in the top right hand corner. It also shows you the number of the question you're on. The stem is on the left. If you can't read that on your screen, don't worry, you don't need to. And then the question is on the right hand side. So with this passage, you would see 4 questions, one after the other. A lot of these passages are quite lengthy, so it's quite tricky trying to absorb all this information. So you can either try and skim read it and then answer the questions, or you can look at the questions, try and identify what might be key words in those questions, and then search for those within the passage. So it's finding the best tactic really that works for you. You don't need any prior knowledge, so even if you know something about the topic being discussed, ignore it, try and forget it. You can only use the information that's contained in the passage. So sort of skim reading, practicing your speed reading skills is good, and also getting used to sort of really zoning in on the question, looking for those keywords and trying to find them quickly. Okay. Second subtest is decision making. Slightly less time constraints, so 31 minutes to answer 29 questions. There's quite a lot of different question types within this subtest, which you'll know if you've started revising this. So you might be faced with things like logical puzzles, syllogisms, Venn diagrams, lots of different things. All the questions are standalone in this section and don't share data. When you get to the test centre, you'll be given a whiteboard and marker pen. And I got lots of questions on this on one of the previous sessions. So I'm not sure why people are worried about this, but it's basically some laminated sheets of white paper. You get 2, so you've got 4 sides of white laminated paper and an erasable marker pen. And you can make any notes, jot down things you need to. If it's Venn diagrams, you might want to sketch one out as you need to. You can't rub them out yourself, so they are erased by the invigilator at the end of the exam. And if you do run out of space, just pop your hand up and request another one. Okay. And if we have a look at one of the decision-making question types, so as I mentioned, these look quite different. There's lots of different question types. This one's a drag and drop type question. So you can see the stem at the top, and then it says place yes if the conclusion follows and no if it doesn't. So you drag the answers across into the correct boxes. Some questions in decision making only have one correct answer out of the multiple choice options presented. Some you can pick up partial marks if you get it partially correct. So this is one of those types of questions. So it's always worth having an attempt at the questions. Even if you don't get it fully right, you can still pick up partial marks. In terms of tips for this section, I've had some quite interesting ones from candidates in the past. We do interview high scoring candidates about how they got through the test and how they prepared and things like that. And some of the candidates said they kind of did a bit of a triage system on the decision making. So if they knew there were questions that took them longer, or if they were struggling with them, they would flag them. You can see the flag and review tool at the end, and they would answer the ones they found easiest. And then once they got through those, they would go into the review screen, go back to the ones they flagged and start answering those. I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it, or it would work for you. You may prefer working through them methodically, but it is an option to sort of have a look at. You will get used to, once you're revising, which question types you find the easiest or which you can answer the quickest. Okay. The third subtest is quantitative reasoning. So 24 minutes for 36 questions. You've been presented with some tables, charts or graphs. You need a familiarity with numbers. So we say GCSE level maths about grade C. If you're not doing maths at the moment, that's absolutely fine, but maybe have a look at things like ratios, percentages, averages and fractions. You will see them repeatedly throughout the test, so have a look at those. But the test it's not really testing your math skills, it's more about your ability to solve problems using numerical skills. So again, you've got the whiteboard and marker pen, and you've also got an online calculator built within the test. So my advice is get used to using the online calculator. You might find it a bit clunky at first when you start using it. It's different, it's not a scientific calculator, but you can't take your own calculator into the exam. So I think it's quite important to revise under exam conditions, to try and mirror the test centre setup as much as you can. Use the online calculator. You can use if you've got a keyboard, you can use the number pad on the right hand side of your keyboard or the mouse to operate the calculator. But the quickest way really is by using a bit of a combination. So use the calculator where you need to, or use your mental maths where you can, and that would save you time. So if we have a look at a question, this is quite a simple one, so it's got quite a small table without much data in there, but it could be quite a large table or a graph or a chart. It could be a large passage of text with lots of figures in it. And then you'll be presented with the question, 5 multiple choice answer options. Obviously, for this section, there is only one correct answer per question. There's no partial marking. And again, this one, the level of maths is not that difficult. It's the speed at which you need to move through it. What I would always say is always have a look at the question first as well before you start trying to digest all the information that you're presented with. There may be a huge table with lots of information and you may only need a fraction of that information to be able to answer the question. So there might be a lot of irrelevant information in there that you don't actually need. So have a look at that when you're working through this. Okay. Abstract reasoning is the fourth subtest. And again, it's one that a lot of candidates find quite tricky when they first start revising it. It is very time pressured, so you've got just 13 minutes to answer 55 questions. So you need to move through this subtest fairly swiftly. But you will find tactics for doing that. So again, in this subtest is looking at your ability to identify patterns amongst abstract shapes. Again, disregard irrelevant or distracting information. So you're trying to test hypotheses or test conclusions, disregard the incorrect ones and reach the correct conclusion quite quickly. There's a few different question types within this subtest, but they're all associated with sets of shapes that you'll be presented with. So if we have a look at one, here's an abstract reasoning question type. So for this question type, you're presented with 2 sets of shapes, and you need to work out what is the pattern or the rule that connects all those boxes within set A. What connects each of those boxes? And then the same in set B, what connects all the boxes in set B? And then you'll be presented with a test shape and asked, does that test shape belong to set A, set B, or neither? So that might take you a while, say 45 seconds or so, or longer when you first start revising. Don't worry about that. But once you've worked out that rule, the next 3 test shapes you're presented with, you'll be very quick at answering those because you'll have worked out the rule. Other question types might ask you, it might present you with a series of shapes and ask you what is the next shape in that series out of a series of test shapes. There's a few different question types. When I say rules or patterns, what we're talking about is things like, is it the type of shape? Is it a square or a circle or a triangle? Is it the shading? Some of the shapes in these sets are shaded. Is that the common rule? Is it their positioning in the box? So is there always a shape in the bottom right-hand corner? Or is there always a square in the top left-hand corner or something like that? If there's arrows in the box, some of them, it may be which direction the arrows are pointing in. Are any of the shapes touching the sides of the box? It could be number. Is it the number of shapes in the box? And when you're looking at number, there's lots of rules it could be. So is it the number of shapes? Is it the number of sides of the shapes? Is it the number of shapes touching the sides of the box? Is it the number of right angles? It could be something like that. Is it symmetry? Things like this. So you'll get really used to spotting these rules and patterns. We have got the UCAT question tutorial, which I would really recommend everybody has a look at if they haven't done already. So it's on the preparation page of our website, and the question tutorial is one for each subtest, and it works through, here's the subtest, here's all the different question types, and here's some tips and strategies for approaching this type of question, and it will give you an example question to work through within the tutorial. I think the one for abstract reasoning, we've updated it again this year, is really useful because it will run you through these types of rules and get you thinking about them. Okay, so for this one, the answer to this one is all the shapes in set A have got curved sides, all the shapes in set B have got straight sides, and if we look at the test shape, that has both. So the answer to this question would be C, neither. Okay. So that's the 4 cognitive subtests. The 5th subtest is situational judgment, or SJT. 26 minutes to answer 69 questions. Most candidates do get through all the questions in this subtest, so they get through answering all the questions. And you'll be presented with a number of different scenarios, and they'll have up to 6 questions associated with that scenario. So it might be as little as 2 questions for each scenario, it might be as many as 6. This is assessing something different. So this is looking at your capacity to understand real world situations and identify appropriate behaviours in dealing with them. So what this is looking to assess is things like integrity, perspective taking, team involvement, communication, resilience, adaptability, professionalism, things like that. Things that really aren't assessed through academic grades, really. So these are the types of things that you might find being assessed on some of the stations when you do your MMIs, if you get through to interview. They're also used quite widely in medical selection, so it won't be the last you see of them if you go through to pursue a medical career. They're used for foundation doctors and GPs, and in lots of other areas of recruitment as well. So these are good skills to learn, although you may think you do your UCAT and you'll never think of any of this again. This is probably something you're going to come across again in later life. So if we have a look at an example question, it looks a little bit like the verbal reasoning in that it's got the paragraph on the left and then the question and response options on the right, but really that's where the similarity ends. The scenario is given on the left. It's a lot shorter than the passages in the verbal reasoning. It could be based in a hospital, a university, or anywhere else. It doesn't really matter where it's based. You don't need any previous medical knowledge in order to answer these questions, and you should only use the information that's contained within the question. It's quite easy to use sort of past knowledge or our own inbuilt biases to sort of feed into the questions, but you really need to try not to do that and just use the information that's within the question. So there's a number of different question types again. For this one, it's asking us how appropriate are each of the following responses by a person in this situation, Naomi, in this instance, in this situation. And you're given 4 response options. Other questions may ask how important a certain thing is to consider. Some may only have 2 response options to choose from rather than 4. Other question types, you may be given a number of response options and asked to rank them or rate them, which is the most important thing to consider and which is the least. So a few different question types. If you're struggling on this subtest, we recommend having a look at the GMC guidelines on good medical practice. Don't try and remember this, you don't need to. You can jot it down if you want to, but it is, we do mention this on our website, and it's the situational judgment question tutorial that I already mentioned on our website. So that does reference that document. It's available on the General Medical Council website, and it just talks about kind of what do we expect from our future doctors? What does it mean to be a doctor in the NHS? So it looks at sort of the behaviours and the attributes that it wants and what is important. Things like confidentiality, professionalism, empathy, things like that. So if you're struggling and you're really finding you're not hitting the nail on the head with these answers, have a read of that. It might really help. Again, like with the decision making, there is partial marking on this subtest. So if you don't quite get the answer fully right, but it's partially right, for some questions you can still pick up partial marks. So it's always worth having. Okay, So how should you prepare? It's got no curriculum content. I think we've already said that, but it is a test of aptitude, but you can revise and you can get better. The more practice questions you do, the better you will get. The smarter you will get at sort of navigating your way through the test and learning to triage your answers. We say around 25 to 30 hours preparation, which we would say is about 4 to 6 weeks before. And that's what our high scoring candidates recommend do. Use the free resources available on the UCAT website. I've mentioned a few already, but just to sort of emphasise, there's lots of free information there. There's a preparation plan that sort of structures, you know, what to do at certain weeks. There's some videos. There's a tour tutorial that works through the functions of the actual test, computer-based test, how to call the calculator, how to move forward and backwards, how to flag things for review. The question tutorials I would really recommend, that I've already mentioned. And then you've got the main bits, which are the question banks and the practice test. So there's huge question banks on there. There's over 1,000 free practice questions. They are enormous. So if you're working through some of those, just make a note of which questions you've done. You know, I've got up to question 20 on verbal reasoning, so that when you come back and start again, it doesn't remember your progress because it's an online bank. So just so that you know you can start back again at question 21. The 4 fully timed practice tests mimic the live test. So these are all questions written by our question writers. They're of the same standard. Some of them are retired questions from previous years. Don't jump straight in and do a practice test would be my advice, unless you've done so already. I would start with the tutorials and then the question banks, and then maybe after a week or 2, try practice tests, see where you're going wrong on timing. So it may be that you're getting nearly all the questions right, but your timing's off. So you need to get quicker on certain sections. The practice test can really help you manage your time management skills. So they maybe then do a few more questions, then the next week do another practice test and build that up until your test date. We always get asked on this section, and no matter how many times I say it, I know you'll still ask me probably in the Q&A, do we recommend any commercial providers? So do we recommend any books? Do we recommend Medify or Medicportal or Kaplan or anybody else? And the short answer really is no, we don't. That's not to say that they might be very good resources, but there are so many commercial companies out there and they charge candidates quite a lot of money for revising for the UCAT, and we don't feel like you should have to do that. We work really hard each year to put more and more preparation materials, more questions in the question banks. We've added an extra practice test this year. We really feel that you should be able to practice using the free resources available to you. We've also got no control over the standard or the quality of what they've done. And again, that's not saying some might not be very good. I'm sure some of it is. But there's new commercial companies popping up every day. And we've just got no control over what they're putting out there. Sometimes we get sent practice questions through our social media channels saying, what is this? I don't understand the answer. Why is this correct? And we'll look at it, and it's not one of ours. And it's not a question that you would ever see on the live test either. So it's not very helpful. What I would say is start with the free materials. If you run out of everything on the UCAT website, then by all means look elsewhere. Some of these companies put quite a bit of free content on their websites to sort of try and tempt you in. So have a look at the free content and the free questions they're offering. Have a look on YouTube. There's some great videos on abstract reasoning and SJT from past candidates, and that's quite helpful. So that's how we would recommend that you prepare. Final tips and advice. I'll stop talking and come to your questions. It is a multiple choice test, so try not to leave any questions unanswered. Try not to leave any blanks. There's no negative marking, so you don't get a point deducted for wrong answer. So it's always worth having a guess. If you're running out of time or you think you're spending too long on a question, be really disciplined with yourself. So have a guess, make a best guess, flag it for review, and come back to it at the end of that subtest if you've got a couple of minutes left. If you haven't got a couple of minutes left and you run out of time, at least you'll have put an answer down rather than leaving it blank. If you do have time, you can come back to it at the end and see which ones you were stuck on or you were struggling with. So get used to using the flag and review function. That is quite a useful tool to be able to improve your timing, I think, working through the test. Okay. Results. So I will say just a quick word on test day as well. If any of you have sat your driving theory test recently, that's the same sort of place you'll be going to sit your UCAT, is the Pearson Test Centre. They're quite strict there, so they have people sitting all sorts of different tests there. So the UCAT driving theory test, IT qualifications, construction qualifications, all sorts. So you might be sat in a test room with other people doing a completely different test to you. It's not like a school exam. You're not in a huge hall. The test room is quite small. There's a sort of a maximum of 20 people in there. There will be people coming and going, so people will be seated by the invigilator halfway through your test. They will do that with a minimum amount of disruption and silence that they can. But if you think you might find that distracting, you are offered earplugs or headphones at the test centre. So if you think you might want them, I would take them if you think that might be useful. There's quite a stringent check-in process, so have a look at that. Have a look at the test day page of our website. It talks you through all this. It also talks to you about the identification that you need to take with you, and again, that's very strict. So it is basically a current passport or a driving licence, in date and signed. If you haven't got that, you need to have a look at what your options are. The test centre have got no ability to waive these rules as well. They're not allowed to just make an exception for somebody. So if you don't have the correct ID, you will get turned away. Okay, so have a look at the test day page. Your results, you get them on the day of your test. So as soon as you leave the test centre, you'll be given a copy of your score report. Each of the 4 cognitive subtests is scored between 300 and 900. So that gives you your total score. And then you get a separate score, which is a banding, situational judgment. So band 1 is the highest, band 4 is the lowest. So there's 2 elements to your UCAT score. I've put the average score up in the corner there from last year. It was 2511, and that was slightly higher than the year before, but it doesn't vary hugely. It is pretty static across the test cycles. So you will know roughly how well you've done just by looking at previous year scores. Halfway through testing, so around about the 16th of September, I think this year, we will publish some interim stats. So we have to wait until enough people have sat their test before we can accurately provide those. So that will give you at that point in testing, what is the average score at that point, and roughly where do we think the deciles are going to be sat. So you will know roughly what decile you're in at that point. Then with a few days at the end of testing, we will publish the final scores, and you'll be able to work out your exact percentile that you've got, this percentile calculator on there. That's really important, and it's really important that you get your UCAT score before you submit your UCAT applications. All our universities use the UCAT in different ways, and I'm sure Lester will tell you about how they use it. So they will all publish this information on the entry requirements pages of their website. So once you know which universities you're thinking of applying to, do some homework and have a look at those pages. So they will all say how they use the score. So is it a big factor for them? For some universities, it's a very strong point in the decision interview. For others, it's less so. Some universities apply a threshold. So if your UCAT score is below that threshold, there is absolutely no point in wasting an application then, because you won't be offered an interview. For some universities, they might not have a threshold, but they might say, we don't interview candidates who've got a band 4 in SJT. So again, if you've got a band 4, don't apply to that university. But then the other way, there are other universities who don't even look at the SJT or the situational judgment test at all in their decision to interview. So it's really important to understand that. And just because one door is closed, you know, several more might still be open. So have a look at that. And that is everything. So just to sort of say, the website, everything I've covered today is on there, ucat.ac.uk. We're also on social media, so I do post quite regularly on Instagram and Twitter, so we put extra practice questions on there, tips and advice from past candidates, and just extra information as we go through the test cycle that might be useful. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can come on to some questions. I hope that was okay. I know I rattled through it all quite quickly, so let me just bring up the question box and we'll have a look. Okay, good question. So how do you apply, qualify for the UCAT SEN? So I mentioned access arrangements. The UCAT SEN is the version of the test that allows 25% extra time. So if you qualify for that in school exams, you can sit that version of the test. You just need to go to the access arrangements page of our website, submit an online application and upload your evidence. And when we say evidence, we would ideally expect to see something from your school or college that says you currently get 25% in your school exams. So it might be your JCQ Form 8, if you're familiar with that, or it might just be a letter from your SENCO or your teacher that says what you currently get. Okay, so we've answered that one. How long should you be for revising for the test? 4 to 6 weeks, we would say beforehand. I mean, if you've got your test booked and you get, say you've booked your test for end of August and you get to a few days before and you really don't feel ready, you can reschedule your test. You do have the option to do that through you can do it all through your web account. So you can have a look at, you'd need to cancel it and reschedule it to a later date. You might not get the exact time you want or test centre, so as things get busier, obviously that gets a bit tricky. You might have to travel to a test centre a little bit further away, but I would say if it's a difference between driving an extra 20 minutes and not feeling ready, I would drive the extra 20 minutes. So you do have that option. Could you please talk about select the strongest argument questions in the decision-making section? Oh, crikey. I would be here all day. So again, I'm going to duck this one, but have a look at the decision-making question tutorial. We do go through that question type there and suggest some tactics for answering it. So I would say have a look at the decision-making question tutorial. It's on the prepare page of the UCAT website. Okay. How is the test centre set up? Okay, that's a good question. So you'll get a desktop PC and a keyboard and a mouse. Screen between you, there is social distancing. In terms of whether you need to wear a mask at the moment, quite complicated in the UK. So at the moment, you haven't got to wear a mask at the moment. I think our test centres would prefer all candidates to wear a mask, but they're going in line with government law, so it's not mandatory. You don't need to wear a mask. If that changes, or obviously if the government offer any different advice, then we will shift in line with whatever the government will say. Yes, so we're talking about how the setup is. If you can, I mean, I know not everybody's got a desktop PC at home. I've taken home a laptop from work to work from home. I did go in and pick up my keyboard and mouse from work there, which has been quite handy. If you can get hold of a keyboard and mouse, I would really recommend that. Or, you know, if you can borrow one or buy one, they're about 10 quid on Amazon for a keyboard, I think it is. I think that's quite useful because you're practicing with the same setup thing in the test centre. I think if you're using a trackpad on a laptop to move around, it does feel quite differently than when you go back to get a mouse. So if you can sort of practice using the similar setup, I think that's useful. But I know it's not ideal for everybody. Are the questions positively or negatively marked? I'm not sure what you mean by that really, but there is no negative marking, so you don't lose marks for an incorrect answer. On the sections where you can get them partially correct, if you are close to the correct answer, you will receive marks. Do candidates usually finish all the questions in the sections? That's another good question. Yeah, things like situational judgment, most people do. Other sections, I think it's around, it varies year on year, but I think something like 15% of candidates don't get through all the questions in each of the sections, so about 15%, but that is about time management. So try and practice that when you're doing the practice test. Be strict with yourself. You know, if you know you've got 45 seconds for a question on such and such subtest, try and use the time as sort of practice like that, even when you're just doing the question banks. I would try and be strict with yourself. If you're running out of time, make a guess, flag it and move on. Try and forget about the question and move on. You can maximise the number of marks you get by being strict with timing, I think. Oh gosh, can you help distinguish between appropriate but not ideal and inappropriate but not awful within the SJT, please? Again, that's really a complex question. I would say it is a small distinction. It will depend on the answer. So there are some things within the SJT that you'll start to recognise. So basically anything that involves any sort of dishonesty or lack of empathy or disregarding the patient's views or opinions or their right to be consulted is often inappropriate. Things that promote openness and communication and honesty are usually going to be more on the appropriate side. So I would say start having a look at things like that. And on the SJT, if you think you are getting them wrong and you don't know why, make sure you read the answer rationales. So in the question banks and the practice questions, you can have a look at the answer rationales and it will tell you what was the correct answer and why. And it's really important to read those, I think. Even sometimes the ones that you are getting correct, to sort of verify, you know, why was it correct? Were you in line with the thinking of the question writers there? Oh gosh, it states around 1,000 official questions are available, but I only seen around 600 to 700, including the practice test. Yes, it will be. Yes, it will be. And we do flex these question banks each year. So we have new ones. We take out old ones if we think they're not representative of the, you know, if they're getting older, we don't think they're really representative of the live test anymore. What if you still haven't booked a test but you want to do the test? It's fine, it's not too late. So booking it is open until the 22nd of September. So create your web account, you need to register, and then once you've registered, you can go into the live booking system and see where your nearest test centre is and look what test dates are available. Okay. If I've applied for a normal test but I'm eligible for extra time, is there a way I can get this changed? Yes, good question. So you need to apply for the extra time first through our access arrangement scheme, so on the access arrangements page. And then if we approve you for the UCAT SEN, you then just need to cancel your current test booking and rebook a UCAT SEN. Okay, you won't get the same, we can't change the test booking because they're done in very strict 2-hour or 2.5-hour time slots. You won't be able to get the same booking slot. You should be able to find one later in the test cycle. Are we going to have a timer in the test? Yes, so you'll see the timer within each subtest in the top right hand corner of the screen. You'll also see that when you're doing the practice test as well. Does everyone doing the UCAT do the same exam? Yeah, that's a good question. So it is pretty much the same exam, but we have different forms of the test. So we do have different forms, and that's from a security point of view of the test security. In case any version of the test is leaked, that we can drop that form of the test. So some may have slightly different questions in them, although they'll all be of equivalent standard. Some may have questions presented in a different order. So if you're sitting the test next to somebody else who's sitting UCAT, you may not be seeing the same questions in the same order. Partial marking. Yes, that's a good question. We get lots of questions on this. Have a look at the scoring and marking page of the UCAT website. That goes into the partial marking. The scoring is quite complex within the UCAT, so I think people often think we're being a bit opaque when we talk about it, but it is very complicated. So within each subtest, you get raw scores and then they're converted to scale scores, and then you see your final score and your banding for SJT. So it's not as simple as if you get it, if you tick this instead of that, you get 1 point, and that you get 2 points. It's not that straightforward, but we do give a bit more information on partial marking on the page of the website, so have a look at that. If you run out of free resources, what do you recommend us to use? I think I've covered that really. I'm not going to recommend any commercial providers. Have a look at what other free resources are out there. If you are thinking that you've got the money and want to use a commercial provider, I'm not saying don't, but I would say get some recommendations. So go on some student forums, ask people who've done it before what they used. The Student Room has got a huge mega thread on the UCAT every year where people are talking about different things they've used, so have a look at that, it's quite useful. How do we know how many marks we need to score band 1 or score a specific score? You don't really, and I think if you start trying to think of it like that, you will just come unstuck. It's best to just answer as many questions as you can, do the best you can, and that will impact on your score. You shouldn't be trying to aim for a certain bracket. Which sections of the exam are eligible for partial marks? So decision making, you got partial marks because some questions have got multiple answers, and situational judgment, you can get partial marks. What headphones are we allowed? Can we wear them at all test centres? So you can't take your own headphones in, that's not permitted, but they can provide you with either the little foam earplugs or some ear defender headphone type things. I'm not sure, I mean, they're not noise cancelling. I don't know how much noise they block out, but you know, be prepared. It's not like a school exam where it's exact silence. It's not like that, and life is not like that. But they will minimise the amount of disruption you encounter at the test centre. It is a vigilated environment. How does the percentile decile ranking work, and what's a good ranking? Okay, so you've got your score. Say your score's 2,600. When we issue, and then you've got a band, whatever, for situational judgment. When we issue the interim test scores in mid-September, you'll be able to see these are the deciles. So these are the brackets of 10%. So you'll be able to see, okay, my score, I'm about in the top 30% of candidates. The percentiles then break that down to actual percentages. So when you've got your final score and we publish it, there's a percentile tracker on the website. You can pop your score in and it will say, you are in the 79th percentile, so you'll know exactly where you're positioned, which you don't need really. I find the only candidates that really want to know that are the ones who have scored like in the top 3%, and they kind of want to put that on their UCAS statement. You know, I'm a brainiac and I've scored in the top 3% in the whole country. But it might be useful for some universities if they apply a threshold. Other universities, they may say, you know, we don't interview candidates who are in the bottom 30%, and that won't be an exact score, but that 30% may flex depending on where the deciles are within each cohort. My form of photo ID was given to be my school as my passport has expired. It doesn't include my middle name, which is present on my Pearson VUE account and is likely to be turned away. Is it like, no, I don't think it will. Can you ping me that on email? So if you can email the UCAT office, ucat@nottingham.ac.uk. So that email address is on our website in lots of different places. So it's ucat@nottingham.ac.uk. Let us just double check on that for you, and we'll confirm. It's always good to check ID. Oh gosh, if you get partial marks on every question of the SJT, would that still be a band 2? I have no idea without looking at the marking system. It's not myself that does that. It's far cleverer people than me that do all the marking. It is built into the test. So I'm sorry, I can't really answer that one. What if there is no appointment available near you and there are even few left in between areas far away from you? It does happen. So again, I would, if you've not booked yet, I would register and book now. This has been a really unusual year in terms of bookings for us. So usually we're nagging people to book. You know, you've registered but you've not booked a test yet, and people may have done that for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're not sure if they want to study medicine yet, so that they haven't booked a test until they're thinking about it. This year, lots of candidates have registered and booked very early. We've got a record number of bookings so far, but we are releasing more capacity. So as we go through the test cycle, Pearson VUE do release more test dates each week to increase the capacity. So they're continuously monitoring where there is capacity and releasing new test dates. So if you're struggling, I would say keep looking every few days, and more test dates are usually published. If you're really struggling and you can't get one near you within reasonable travelling distance, and we do expect people to be quite flexible in, you know, you might have to drive half an hour or so, then give customer services a call and ask them for some help in helping you find a test slot if you really are struggling. Okay. Right. And what is the best way to revise for it? I think we've covered that. So have a look at the free resources available on the UCAT website, start with the tutorials, then the question banks, and then the practice tests. Could you put a link in for the UCAT partial marking stuff? Yeah, I can do that afterwards. Yeah, it's on the test day page, I think, under scoring and marking. If you finish early, can you leave before the test is finished? Yes, so if you finish each subtest early, you can end that subtest early, move on to the next one. And then, as soon as you finish with each subtest, if you've gone to the review screen, you've checked any answers, you've flagged that you weren't sure about, yes, you can finish early. When do we find out this year's deciles? I think it's the 16th September, so that's when we're going to publish interim statistics, but we will email you and tell you when they're available. So once you've registered with us, we've got your email. We do communicate with you at regular intervals. So we will tell you when the deciles are out, and we'll tell you when the final test stats are out, and we will also tell you when your results have been sent to universities. Would a citizen card be accepted for ID at the test centre? I've not heard of that. Have a look at the ID policy page. It's very specific of what sort of in terms of EU cards and national identity cards we can accept. So have a look. My ID was also given to me by my school, so will they accept it? Definitely, yes. So there is an example, we call it the Hogwarts letter, but there's an example on the website of a school letter. So say if you haven't got a passport or a driver license, you can get a letter from your school that needs your photo on it. It needs some specific wording and it needs the school stamp that half covers the photo. That's very specific. If it doesn't cover the photo, it won't be accepted. Excuse me a second. But there is an example of that letter on the ID policy page of the website, so you can have a look at that. Average good scores. So an average score last year was 2511. A good score, really, there is no pass and fail. It really comes down to what university you want to apply to. So have a look at the entry requirements pages of their websites and see what they're asking for. They should all give you an indication. Somebody said, is it too late to book? No, it's not. What is the rescheduling policy? So yes. So if you're not feeling prepared or excuse me, fall ill a few days before your test and don't feel that you're well enough to test, hopefully we'll have got rid of all this isolation stuff by the time you come to test. But say if you did have to isolate or a family member had got COVID to isolate, you can reschedule. As long as you do it, I think it's 24 hours before your test, you won't get charged. So you just need to go on through your web account and reschedule your test. And you won't get charged for that. If you leave it until the morning of your test and then you reschedule, still reschedule, but you'll get charged again. That's because we'll have been charged for the test slot by Pearson VUE because it's too late for them to fill that test slot. So you would incur a financial penalty and reschedule within time. But yeah, I would say if you're not feeling confident or you're feeling ill and it's not just normal nerves or whatever, then yeah, reschedule. It's better to feel fully prepared because you only get one shot at it. I've done the Hogwarts type letter, but the stamp covers more than half photo. Is that okay? Yes, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, as long as it's covering some of the photo, that's great. Does every test centre allow you to type the number for the calculator from the keypad? Yes, and I would say just from a personal point of view, I think that's the way to do it. So you can use your mouse to click on the numbers on the calculator, or you've got the numerical keypad on the right hand side. I think that's the quickest way to kind of use the calculator. Make sure you've got the number lock switched on because it won't be switched on when you get there. So if you're thinking, oh, it's not working, don't go into panic mode, just make sure you've got the number lock switched on. And then there's a question there for Leicester. So what's the score requirement for Leicester? So that's Nicola will be answering that for you. Oh, I've done nothing but talk. So I hope that that's been useful. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've not told you this year. Everything's on the website. Have a look. You know, there's loads of free resources out there. So if you really are struggling, you know, yeah, you'll be absolutely fine. Can we get a calculator upgrade because the exam one is difficult to use? No, sorry, you can't. I'm afraid we don't let. I don't know why this has come about, but it's always been the case. You have to use the online calculator. That's why I would say, sort of get you. I know it feels clunky when you first start using it, but have a go at using that, and you'll just get used to using it. So don't use a hand calculator. I wouldn't when you're doing your revision. Okay, I hope that's been useful. If you really think of anything that I've not covered or you've got any questions that are worrying you, you can just email us or contact us on social media, or put any questions through Leicester. We're happy to answer anything else.
Right, thank you, Esther. Sorry to cut you short. We've got another session running at 12.
That's all right.
Non-stop talk, so you need to go and have a bit of a break. Thanks everyone for coming along, and obviously thank you all for your gazillion questions as well. Hopefully we've answered them. The good news is that tomorrow morning you will have a half-hour session with your mentors talking about the UCAT. They can give you their experiences and you'll get to ask them more questions as well from a kind of a personal, how they found it point of view. So that will be tomorrow morning after your mentor challenge session. So fear not, there is more time to talk UCAT tomorrow. So Esther, thanks ever so much. Thank you to everyone who's come, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.